snowy mountain peaks, deep green valleys, endless nature, dotted with beautiful old monasteries, friendly people, rich history and culture, and a surprisingly charming capital. Armenia might not be the world's biggest party or tech hub, but it is a beautiful country with warm and friendly people and a fascinating culture. It is also an absolute treasure chest for people who love spending time outside in breathtaking nature, hiking, mountain biking, climbing, and so much more. Not to mention it being a paradise for history buffs who will discover traces of empires long lost, tragic battles long fought, religion, culture, and a resilient people that persevered. It is a region still practically devoid of tourism, meaning it is 100% authentic, non-gentrified, and has a low cost of living. Yet, its small and bustling capital of Yerevan offers all the digital infrastructure you need as a digital nomad. And its visa policies will allow many passport holders to stay for relatively long, if not indefinitely, and take their families. So let's take a closer look at the country, its culture, its history, where to stay, and what to do from a perspective of a digital nomad. And of course, its visa policies. If you want to jump to a specific part of the video or participate in any of the activities that I am mentioning, you will find timestamps and links in the travel research section down below. So without further ado, let's have a closer look at Armenia. Let's get into some country facts first. Armenia is a landlocked country in the mountainous Caucasus region between Asia and Europe. It borders Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Iran. Borders with Turkey and Azerbaijan are closed for political reasons. More details on that in the history bit. However, travel to the Nagorno-Karabakh region, or Artsakh as it is called in Armenian, from Armenia used to be able until a couple of months ago. This is an unrecognized, self-declared country in Azerbaijan, with an Armenian ethnic majority living in it. It is officially part of Azerbaijan, but controlled by the Armenian majority living in it and backed by Armenia. The dispute over it is the main reason for the political tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan. You can take a matrushka, so a minibus, from Yerevan to the capital of the region, Stepanakert, if you wish. But you should be aware that in the past month, tensions here have been running very high. Heavy artillery has been fired and people have been killed. So, depending on when you watch this video, I would strongly suggest reconsidering a visit. If you decide to visit, however, you should know that you will have problems trying to enter Azerbaijan afterwards. Since the region is officially on Azerbaijani territory and you do not have an entry stamp for Azerbaijan, to the Azerbaijani border officials it will look like you entered Azerbaijan illegally. So, in short, if you plan to enter Azerbaijan on the same passport, do that before going to Stepanakert. In any case, you should pay very close attention to the political situation before you decide to travel to that region. Armenia was part of the Soviet Union until 1991, when it regained independence. It is also the first country in the world that took Christianity as a state religion in the year 301, with many beautiful century-old monasteries standing as witness of the country's long religious history. Language. The language spoken in Armenia is Armenian, one of the oldest in the world. It has its own very beautiful looking alphabet. Street signs will also be written in Latin letters, so you will be able to read them, but English is not widely spoken. You might get along with a little bit of English in Yerevan, particularly amongst the younger people, and people who work in the tourism industry might be able to speak just enough English to, get your stuff going. But other than that, English is not very common, and a smile, an open heart and mind, and your hand and feet will be your best means of communication. Armenians are super friendly and not used to tourists coming to their country, so they will really want to help you even if they don't speak your language. Learning a few basic words in their language will go a long way, however. So let's look at a few more historical and cultural facts about Armenia before moving on to where to live. When it comes to the weather, you can expect really hot summers of up to 40 degrees Celsius and crispy cold winters. Armenia is a very mountainous country and snowfall in those regions is common, whereas a little less frequent in the capital of Yerevan. Like their neighbor Georgia, Armenia has a very old and good winemaking culture, and there are many opportunities to explore and taste your way around a vineyard or two. But another national alcohol making craft is definitely brandy making, with dozens of different bottles available in the stores. Armenia's currency is the Armenian dram. Currently, $1 equals 391 Armenian dram. A very important, if not the most important, natural landmark and one of the holiest sites to Armenians is Mount Ararat, a dormant volcano which can be seen from Yerevan. It is also depicted everywhere in the country, even brandy is named after it. Mount Ararat is believed to be the mountain on which biblical Noah's Ark landed after the big flood, and thus it is where life started again after the flood. With Armenia being a country that has converted to Christianity very early, and with the exception of Georgia also being the only Christian country in a predominantly Islamic region, you might see why this mountain is so important to the Armenian people. The big pain point? It is no longer on Armenian territory. It stands on territory that since the Turkish-Armenian War in 1920 belongs to Turkey. And since there is still quite a bit of tension between the two countries, the borders are closed and Armenians have to admire Mount Ararat from afar. By the way, I was going to release a Digital Nomad Destination guide to Turkey after this video, but as you might have heard, there has been a very recent, very horrible earthquake in the area of Turkey and Syria, and it just didn't feel right to talk about, beautiful vacation spots in the area while people there have lost everything, including many of their loved ones. So I want to take this opportunity to maybe urge you, if you want to help inform yourself, pay close attention where your money goes to, particularly people in Syria who've had basically already barely anything before the earthquake, are suffering a lot and are receiving a lot less help than, for example, their Turkish neighbors. Generally, my only urge to you, if you are considering of helping here, is that you inform yourself very well to which organization your money goes and where the money goes and where it'll be used. With that said, however, let's get back to Armenia. Mount Ararat. Very important to the Armenians, but unfortunately out of their reach for the moment. Now, let's take a brief look at the fascinating, often very tumultuous and tragic history of Armenia. In general, it is important to know that settlements in what is now Armenia date back to prehistoric times, and some of the oldest signs of settlements in the world have been found here, pointing to the incredible historical events witnessed by these lands. The area has also been conquered, annexed, expanded, and divided over the millennia by the Romans, the Ottomans, the Persian Empire, Azerbaijan, the Mongols, and many others. What is most interesting to understanding Armenian people and culture today is, in my opinion, the more recent history, starting maybe with the years leading up to the Armenian genocide, the first genocide in Europe in the 20th century, and one that it seems many people do not know about. Ottomans and Russians clashed repeatedly in the Caucasus Mountains over centuries leading up to World War I. Armenia had at that point been fought over by different powers of the regions for centuries as well. Eventually, East Armenia became the Armenian Oblast, making it a province of the Russian Empire. And West Armenia, in eastern Anatolia of Turkey today, became part of the Ottoman Empire. This presented a problem to the Ottoman Sultan Hamid. His empire at this point in time was on the brink of collapse, and he was worried that the West Armenians, who were part of his empire, would support an invasion by the Russian Empire should it occur. he ordered the execution of the Armenians in that area of his empire, a time known as the Hamidian executions between 1894 and 1896, killing between 100,000 and 300,000 Armenians. When World War I broke out, leading to increasingly violent fighting between the Ottoman Empire, that was now only a shadow of its former self, and the Russian Empire in the Caucasus Mountains, religious tensions as well as xenophobia and ethnical hatred increased in the area. And once again, the Ottomans feared Armenians supporting the Russian Empire and rounded up Armenian intellectuals and community leaders, which were executed or deported. Deportation of Armenians continued and increased, with the goal to remove Armenians from eastern Anatolia and into today's Syria, on foot and without food or water, killing 1.5 million Armenians in the years between 1915 and 1917, though some sources mention this went on until 1923. Between 8 and 10 million Armenians fled from the area, leaving not only the area over to Turkey, the area where Mount Ararat stands, but also making Armenia the only country with a 3 times larger group of its people living outside of its territory than inside to this day. Turkey actually to this day denies that a genocide took place. So you can see how political relations between the two countries would be more than tense, to say the least. After World War I, Armenia briefly gained independence and formed the Republic of Armenia, in the area that had been part of the Russian Empire. Western Armenia was kept by Turkey. 2 years later, in 1920, Armenia went to war with its other neighbor, Azerbaijan, over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Russia backed Azerbaijan and Azerbaijan won the conflict. When the Soviet Union eventually collapsed, the region voted to join Armenia and serious fighting broke out in the area, with both sides accusing each other of atrocities between 1992 and 1994. The conflict over the region has been ongoing at different intensities, but right now, tensions are the highest they have been in 25 years. It is recommended that you stay away from the border region of the two countries. As I mentioned, Armenia regained independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. It went through a peaceful revolution in 2008 as well, the Velvet Revolution, aiming at better living standards and removing corruption. Last but not least, to end on a lighter note, let's talk about drinking fountains. They are everywhere in Yerevan and a big part of the culture, meaning that you do not have to buy bottled water, just take a reusable water bottle with you and you can fill it up basically anywhere. Now, let's move on to digital nomad infrastructure and cost of living. Digital nomad infrastructure refers to things you as a digital nomad need to live your location-independent lifestyle. First, of course, always internet. Wi-Fi is widely available in cafes and restaurants, particularly in Yerevan. Some places, like metro stations in Yerevan, even offer public Wi-Fi. If you want mobile internet to really ensure reliable access everywhere, the best idea is to always get a local SIM card, which is easy and affordable. Just remember to take your passport to get one. Yerevan is also the country's growing tech hub, which means a plenty of co-working spaces with good internet connections and the possibility to meet like-minded people. If you arrive in Armenia by plane, you will arrive at the Zvatnos International Airport, about 15 kilometers from Yerevan. The other option to travel to Armenia is overland, and since the borders with Turkey and Azerbaijan are closed, that leaves Georgia and Iran, with Georgia being the faster and therefore more comfortable option. Plus, like I mentioned in last week's Digital Nomad Destination Guide to Georgia, check it out over here, Georgia has a very generous visa policy, making it most likely easier to enter and spend some time in Georgia to then continue to Armenia than from Iran. Once in Armenia, you have a couple of options to travel around in the country. Now, keep in mind that the country does not yet have a super developed tourism infrastructure, which is part of its charm. This does, however, mean that things might take a little longer than what you're used to. The most common way to travel in the country are buses and shared minibuses called marshrushkas. They are really inexpensive. You can ask for help in your accommodation where you need to go, since you won't be able to rely on finding someone that can give you directions in English once you are at the bus station. Armenia also has a train network that connects the bigger cities as well as Tbilisi in Georgia. Train rides are relatively affordable too, but if you're used to high-speed intercity trains, be prepared for a little slower service. That at least allows you to see much of the countryside. A challenge and a beauty of Armenia is that many of its most beautiful landmarks are on the countryside. Pair this with the lack of English spoken by the general population, and one of your best options are organized tours, of which there are a few very nice ones from Yerevan. I will link some down below. This allows you hassle-free and well-organized travel. Or the other option, particularly if you want to be totally independent and just stop wherever you please on the way, is of course to rent a car. Just be prepared that the roads are not in the best condition and the driving style is a little more erratic than what you might be used to. You will need to present an international driver's license to rent a car. Yerevan also has decent and inexpensive public transport with trolley buses and even a subway line. You can of course also use taxis. A popular app that works like Uber or Bolt is Yandex Taxi. Cost of living. As usual, my numbers are from Numbeo and are translated to US dollars to make it more comparable for everybody watching. A family of 4 will approximately have to calculate for $2,165 US dollars per month without rent. A single person will pay approximately $609 US dollars per month without rent. Let's break that down a little, shall we? An inexpensive meal in a restaurant will cost you an average $7 US dollars and 67 cents. A cappuccino will cost you $2 US dollars and 91 cents. Monthly transport will cost you about $11 and 11 cents. Taxi starting tariff is $1 US dollar and 53 cents, while 1 kilometer taxi ride will cost you 26 cents. Basic utilities will cost you approximately 114 US dollars per month for an 85 square meter apartment, and monthly internet would cost you $18.77. A one-bedroom apartment in the city center will cost you approximately 956 US dollars per month, and a one-bedroom apartment outside of the city center will cost you 649 US dollars per month. Keep in mind that these prices are averages. Let's take a look at where to stay. Yerevan, the surprisingly hip capital, probably is the biggest and most suitable city for digital nomads in Armenia. It is home to about 1.1 million people, which amounts to 1/3 of Armenia's entire population. It is also located relatively central in the country, which makes it a good base from which to discover the rest of the country. It has plenty of cafes, cool little restaurants, co-working spaces, a growing tech startup scene, and all the other amenities you would expect from a big city. It also has a vivid nightlife with plenty of clubs and bars. Yerevan is also referred to as the Pink City because a majority of the buildings are constructed from a very special pink-hued tuff stone that is basically made from compressed volcanic ash and is typical for the area. And though this is unfortunately not very obvious when you wander the streets, Yerevan is one of the oldest cities in the world, dating back over 2,800 years, which makes it even older than Rome. Unfortunately, under Soviet Union rule, a majority of the old buildings and landmarks were torn down and replaced with Soviet architecture in an attempt to create the perfect metropole. A neighborhood that has been spared is Kond, Yerevan's oldest neighborhood, where, when wandering the streets, you can get an idea of historic Yerevan. Unfortunately, many houses are dilapidated, but you can also see the efforts of the community to make this area hip and interesting while preserving its charm. Take a couple of hours to get lost in the labyrinth of tiny alleys and admire the colorful street art left here to breathe new life into the district. A great starting point in Yerevan is to head to the Cascades for a brilliant view of the city. It is an almost park-like, enormous staircase that you can wander up, stop to admire contemporary art, or sit amongst the greenery that has been planted on or into the stairs. There's also an elevator if you don't want to make the climb, for some traditional Armenian craft shopping, or just to soak up the atmosphere, head to the Vernissage Market not far from the Republic Square. Here you will find many beautiful made traditional Armenian crafts pieces. Speaking of the Republic Square, during summer month there is a nightly fountain show on display here, and it is packed with people just enjoying the show and an evening outside. If you wish to learn more about the Armenian genocide or Armenia's incredibly eventful history, you should stop by the Genocide Museum and the History Museum here. But you will also find art galleries and museums that are worth a visit. There are also a couple of Soviet monuments in the city you can visit, but I much prefer the symbolism of the very impressive Mother Armenia statue. It symbolizes peace through strength. It is located on a hill, overlooking and maybe guarding Yerevan, as well as facing the Turkish border. Maybe in defiance? Now that you have settled in Yerevan and had some time to discover your base, let's take a look at some of the beautiful places you can visit in the rest of Armenia. As I said, many of them are quite off the beaten track, so joining a tour or renting a car are your easiest options. Tatev. Tatev is famous for two things: the longest cable car ride in the world and the Tatev monastery that the ride leads up to. And both are definitely worth a visit. The cable car, also called the Wings of Tatev, will take you across the gorge of the Zorats Canyon, and the view of the area is an experience of a lifetime. It gives you a peek of the treasures that the area has to offer. Small, historic villages where time hasn't moved for centuries. Majestic mountains and clear streams. Day treks or hikes that take you into the wilderness for days. And of course, the impressive sight that is the Zorats Canyon. The monastery itself is worth a visit, not only for its beautiful vantage point, it also has a stunning interior with small rays of sunlight mysteriously streaming into the small windows, a stark contrast to the rugged grey stone walls. There are too many beautiful monasteries in Armenia to fit them all into one video, so I will mention two more that are historically very important before moving on. Khor Virap Monastery. This is where Gregory the Illuminator was held prisoner in a dungeon for 13 years by Armenia's king. Gregory the Illuminator, who was Christian, then went on to cure Armenia's king of grave illness, thus converting him to Christianity in 301 AD and becoming his spiritual advisor. And this is how Armenia became the first Christian country. Aside from this very important historical background, the monastery also gives you an absolutely breathtaking view of the Armenians' most treasured holy site, Mount Ararat. Of equal historic importance is Echmiadzin Cathedral, the oldest cathedral in Armenia, and apparently even in the world. You can also visit a museum here that claims to have some very special artifacts. A piece of Jesus' cross, the lance that Jesus was pierced with on the cross, and apparently even a piece of Noah's Ark. Moving way backwards in history to a long time before Christianity, you could visit the pagan temple of Garni. It is the only still preserved pagan temple in the country, though much of it was rebuilt in the 60s with the original stones after the original temple had collapsed during a devastating earthquake in 1679. But the temple itself dates back to the 1st and 2nd century BC and was dedicated to the god of sun, Mir. You will have a great view over the Azad Gorge and a great opportunity to explore the dramatic nature in the area as well as dwell in the spirituality of the location. And since we are going back in time, let's take a quick look at one of Armenia's oldest settlements, dating back 3,000 years, Gyumri. This is also Armenia's second biggest city, and walking through the Kumairi historic district will give you a distinct feeling of having been propelled back in time. This city oozes the historic authenticity that Yerevan, as interesting as it is, has unfortunately lost in many places. Traveling even further back in time, and a place of great academic debate, is the Army of Stones, the Stonehenge of Armenia, or Carahunge as it is called in Armenian. This is a megalithic site of 200 stones that stand on a plateau and that have had scientists argue over them for decades. No one really knows how they got there or what they were used for, though some researchers suggest that the holes in them functioned as a form of prehistoric telescope. There have been debates over whether Stonehenge, that is about 2,000 years younger than this site, has been in reference to Carahunge, and that the name Stonehenge has its origin in Armenian, but these are fiercely debated theories in the scientific community. The truth is, nobody knows, which only adds to the appeal of the site. To enjoy some water sports, head to one of the highest lakes in the world and another one of Armenia's absolute treasures, Lake Sevan, located at an altitude of 1,900 meters above sea level. Overlooking it is another beautiful monastery, 9th century Sevanavak Monastery, which, by the way, is worth a visit too. But back to the lake. Lake Sevan is also called the Sea of Armenia and is a very popular destination for Armenians. The area is blessed with a rich biodiversity, beautiful small villages, and great walking trails. Perfect to spend a couple of relaxing days. For more relaxation and water activities, head to Jermuk, the most important thermal spa town in Armenia. Over 40 natural thermal springs that are said to have healing properties are located here. A perfect destination to relax and recover. And if you are getting antsy after too much downtime, head to Jermuk Waterfall, Armenia's second highest waterfall. Alright, so now let's look at the visa situation. As of now, Armenia does not have a specific digital nomad visa. However, for passport holders of many nationalities, it is possible to stay a relatively long time in the country and even possibly extend the stay indefinitely and bring your family. But first, for shorter stays, as usual, a tourist visa is the best bet. If you are new to the digital nomad lifestyle, keep in mind though that tourist visas are usually used for travel purposes and it is not officially permitted to work on these, although many digital nomads use a tourist visa for their lifestyle. If you have more questions about tourist visa versus digital nomad visas, check out the video that is linked above for more in-depth details on this. If you are a citizen of the EU, the US, or any of the other countries that are now listed on the screen, you can enter Armenia visa-free and stay for 180 days. This already gives you a decent amount of time to really get to know the country and explore it. It's also a great way to slow mad, to not travel too quickly from country to country, but to really get to know a country, settle down, learn its culture. For everyone else, a visa on arrival or a visa through the embassy are options. A visa on arrival costs about $31 for a visa for 120 days, so that too gives you a decent amount in the country. Unfortunately, if you are one of the nations that is going to need a visa through the Armenian embassy, you will have to get a letter of invitation from inside the country first, so from somebody living in the country, and that means a lot more hassle. Nevertheless, for those who want to stay even longer in Armenia, Armenia has introduced a scheme that is supposed to attract people who are willing to invest in the country. That could be an option. Here you would get a residence permit for between 1 to 3 years. That can be prolonged, and after 3 years you can actually get an Armenian citizenship. To do so, you need to register a business in Armenia. This could also mean that you could register yourself as a business as a freelancer. Here are the steps to do so. You can either do these steps remotely or travel to Armenia to do so. It is strongly recommended that you take help of an Armenian immigration lawyer for the steps. First step, to register as a sole proprietor at the Armenian tax office. For this, you're going to need the completed application, your original passport, which is why it is good to either travel there yourself or use a lawyer, and a copy of your passport. The copy needs to be apostilled and translated to Armenian, and you will need to prove that you paid the fee of approximately $7.60. Once you get your tax ID, you can now apply for residency. Here you can either apply for a temporary residence permit valid for 1 year and renewable, or a permanent one valid for 5 years and renewable. You will need your passport, a passport photo, a copy of your passport, again translated to Armenian and apostilled, a medical certificate proving that you are of good health. Usually you can get these from hospitals or your local doctor, and proof of the business ownership in Armenia, i.e. your registered business and tax ID. Next, you will be required to pay the residence permit fee, which varies depending on the length of your residency permit. This could be between $264 for the temporary residence permit and $354 for the permanent one. And next, you just wait for approval, which can take about 2 months. If you are interested in traveling in the area and are not entirely sure if Armenia is your spot, or you are wondering where to go next before or after Armenia, check out the video to Georgia, which has a super generous visa policy. Here, basically, many people can stay indefinitely without a visa policy. And keep an eye out for my next video, which is going to be about Kyrgyzstan, a very special destination that has just started to introduce, to test drive, basically, a digital nomad visa scheme for some countries.